Today, in this particular building, in this room, we are sort of discussing the Muslim Manifesto, which I'm not going to talk about too much, but just sort of give you a flavor of what we may be talking about today. I thank Lord Nazir Ahmed for hosting the program, firstly, and also Sayyid Mohsin Abbas for doing the immense amount of work that he has done in the last couple of weeks to get this far. Now, the whole issue of why a Muslim Manifesto will arise. Obviously, there will be views. Some will ignore it. Others will put a different spin to it. I think we are living, to use a cliched phrase, we are living in interesting times. Not only are they interesting, but things are happening at many levels. Economic level, cultural level, social level. With what's happened in Greece recently, we are seeing that the ordinary people who've been going through the austerity measures over the last 5 years in Europe are realizing that they need to do something. Muslims, usually all the figures and the statistics that show are probably at the lowest end of that sort of economic situation. The challenge for the Muslims, as far as I can see, someone who's lived here, grew up here, has spent all his life in Balam, which is the gateway to the south, which was made famous by an actor long time ago. So having seen the community, and we have often been sort of ghettoized by ourselves and by those who maybe oppose us. So what we challenge as a community is that we need to work with the wider community, because at the end of the day, we live here, we ain't going anywhere. So we are here launching this Muslim Manifesto not as a ghetto identity, but really to reach out to the wider community, that what affects the wider community affects us, and what affects us affects the wider community. And finally, just to sort of put it in a nutshell, what's happening globally is there was a fantastic article in The Guardian recently by Yanis Varoufakis, who's the economic minister of Greece. He says, when you get elevated into position, he says, a sense of self-satisfaction from being feted by high and mighty did begin on occasion to creep upon me. And what a non-radical, ugly, corruptive and corrosive sense it was. So as soon as one gets power, that's the problem. And really, this is exactly what Imam Ali alayhi salam talked about in that letter to Malik Ashton. This is where I will stop and request Lord Nazir to say a few words. And Imam Ali alayhi salam says that take care that conceit of your position and vanity of wealth may deceive you to lose sight of such a grave and important responsibility. So exactly what 1400 years later Yanis is talking about, that as soon as you get in that power, it might sort of cloud your vision and what you want to do for the ordinary people.
First of all, let me first say thank you very much to our brother Mohsin Abbas for the excellent work that he's done in producing this first draft Manifesto Watch, or the Muslim Manifesto 2015. When he contacted me and started talking about this concept, I was very excited, and I know that this meeting can and will and maybe have a negative headlines in the newspapers too, because a similar thing in France, with that Muslims are putting up their candidates and all sorts of extremists and people like that. I fully understand, and I am prepared to defend this meeting, to say this is a great beginning. This is the first time in many, many decades. I've been in the Labour Party. I was in the Labour Party. Now I'm independent. I've been in politics for over 38 years. Britain is one of the greatest countries in the world, where we have in law, we have equality in law, we are equal members of society. But sadly, we're not equal. Sadly, we're not doing as well as our other members of the society are doing. It's almost now acceptable to have a go at Muslims and religion, and just criticize You know, if anybody wants to write an article and become popular, the bigger questions that you ask, you know, first it used to be, is it Nazir Ahmad who happens to be little bit religious, or is it him who's extremist? Is it him who's supporting, because he talks about Palestine, that he's extremist, that he talks about Palestine? But now even the so-called Muslims, the so-called a candidate who happens to be a Muslim, sorry, it might be from your party, but it doesn't really matter which party he's from. We have problems, but when there are problems, then at least the government and the parliament and those candidates need to give assurance to our community that their vote will be valued. We have nearly 3 million Muslims in this country. They are 4.4% of the population. There are 40 constituencies at least that can be swung with the Muslim vote. I'm not saying for 1 minute, and I will never advise Muslim community to vote for one party. But what I say is that when you have hustings meetings, you invite the candidates, you give them the manifesto, you ask them the question, he who answers your questions rightly, vote for him or her. But, you know, not for a party, because that would be a mistake. It's better to have candidates who support your cause, whether it is to make sure that you are part of society, make sure that you are benefiting from economics, social, you know, whatever we are doing that way, and also the kind of language and the kind of racism and Islamophobia because of your political views, whether it is to do with Palestine, whether it is to do with the other issues locally or internationally. But nevertheless, there are so many issues, I think, that they need to be asked. Those people who are standing for elections, they will come to you, all of them. Please organize hustings meetings for them. Muslims are not saying, I am 100% sure. They are not saying we want special treatment because we have a manifesto or we have a demand. All they're asking is for equal treatment. They want to be part of the British society with equal rights and to live peacefully without being demonized on daily basis, whether it is 2/3 of the newspapers that somehow attack the Muslim community and question their loyalties and question their, where they come from and the turbans they wear or the beards they wear and why they do that and how they are linked to one international organization or another. But I think I've gone on for too long. Thank you very much, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you very much, Lord Nazir. Please thank him in a warm way.
Discussions on the subject of the Muslim community are so often mixed up with race. And for instance, just earlier you were talking about racism against Muslims. Well, you obviously can have somebody from a particular race who is or is not a Muslim, and vice versa. So there's issues of culture, there's issues of ethnicity, which I've mentioned. There's issues of Baradari, and it's a huge issue in Bradford, I have to tell you. And there's also an issue, and I've already mentioned it, of class. So as I look down here, although this is but as I look down here, I can pick out things here which I find it difficult to differentiate or to isolate the Muslim bit of it. Now, what's the significance of that? If you are interested, if you are a good liberal, which I am, then you are interested in your principles and values. And one of those, a fundamental one, is to ensure that people have the right to practice their religion, as long as, of course, they don't break any of the liberal principles that I have. But some of the things that I find in the manifesto could apply to people who are not Muslims. So, just picking out here, commit to ethical British foreign policies that uphold the human rights of all peoples. That's not a Muslim issue. That's a human rights issue that I would expect everyone from all parties to have sympathy with. but also to significantly reduce poverty in Muslim communities. Now, are we saying that there is something about Muslims that leads to, in itself, that leads to low educational attainment or low economic performance? I don't think so. So I have to pick out of this, and I could give other examples as well. Reduce higher than average unemployment in Muslim communities, significantly improve health and well-being in Muslim communities. Well, I actually want to improve them everywhere. And if it so happens that a predominantly Muslim community has poor health, I want to do that, but not because of the Muslims, because that's just what I want to do. It's part of my values and policy. So I don't mean to pull it apart. I have only had but that's the thought that comes to mind. One thing that I do think is missing, is political involvement of Muslims. How do they have an avenue for expressing and supporting their faith? And I'm sorry to say, but yes, there are people, candidates, who knock on a door saying, I'm a Muslim, you're a Muslim, you must vote for me. And there will be wide-scale use of that in the forthcoming election in my constituency and indeed in Bradford West, which of course is completely wrong. I have to tell you that although we're a small group on Bradford Councils, 9 councils, we're now down to 8 on there. We could have been the largest group on Bradford Council about 10, 12 years ago, when I was approached by some people who happened to be Muslims, but I'm not sure that's relevant, who said, if you let us have candidates there, there and there, we'll bring you 200 new members. And we said, no. You're not even a member of the party, you're actually members of other parties. And I actually do think there's a lot of work to be done, because I'm sorry to have to say this, but the leadership has been very poor within what happens to be the Muslim community. But again, it's not the Muslim community or the Muslimness of it which has brought that about. It's the playing of politics, which has nothing to do with British politics, I have to tell you. It's to do with other games, and I've mentioned the rhetoric and the impact that has on elections in Bradford. And one final point about aspirations, because yes, it does happen to be, maybe disproportionately, although now the Roma and East Europeans have come in, it's less the case, that many from the Muslim community are really, really struggling. Some are doing very, very well, but that again is not to do with being Muslims. It's about coming from really poor parts of the world, and we have that with other people who are not Muslim, not from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Kashmir. So it's a complex issue. I'm sorry I'm going on too long, but this is a really complex issue. So I think there's an aspiration issue, I think there's a leadership issue within the community, and what I found is that the most articulate and I would say well-educated members of the so happens to be Muslim community have just given up on politics because they are sick to death of the games that are being played, and that is a tremendous loss to the British, whether they're for us or for any other party, a loss to the British political system.
I entered politics really just for one simple reason. I was to ensure no future generations endured the poverty, the injustices and the hardships that I faced growing up as an immigrant child. And I find today one of the most worrying things is the rise of UKIP. And what's particularly worrying about their rhetoric and their narrative of anger is it's not just them saying it, but they're creating a slipstream for the two major parties to follow. And that, I think, is particularly dangerous, and I think we need to address that narrative as positively as possible. And one of the key points that David made, which I am in complete agreement with, is on the issue of poverty. My main campaign as an MP, or a future MP, is to eradicate child poverty in the UK by 2020, an eminently feasible aspiration. There are plenty of good items here, many of which I would agree with, and the four highlighted ones on. I just today, in fact, submitted a paper to the government on my race equality strategy, which did look at the suggested manifesto points here, which are, number one, reducing poverty in Muslim communities, but in all communities as well. Looking at criminalization and why certain demographics are leading to a rise in the prison population, as well as inequality of access to healthcare. And I will get to the fourth point about the media very quickly. But I think the one thing that is missing here is role models. I think one of the positives about today is that we can speak as a diverse and tolerant and progressive community with a strong voice. And we must promote. There was a time in the world when we led, when Muslims and Islamic thinking was at the forefront of science, of culture, of art, and led the world while Europe was going through the Dark Ages. And I think we must re-embrace that and celebrate that through our role models, through individuals, people who have succeeded in our communities, as well as people who have succeeded in the world of sport, in media, in finance, in all walks of life. So I think that's very, very important and something I would encourage you to embrace. And I think on the fourth point, I think just coming back as a final issue, which was more robust legislation to curb media hate, I think it is another reason why tonight is so important is if we don't speak up for ourselves, we really can't expect anyone else to. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I have been in this country for nearly 45 years, and we have seen, when we came over all those years ago, my father and then subsequently the second generation, we didn't expect to stay here for this long. We thought we'll be gone by now, back home and whatever else. It didn't happen. Now we have realized, many speakers have already said, this is our home now. Hence, priorities have changed. And our children, they want to succeed in this country. It's good that we have equal opportunities available in this country, but nevertheless, with changing times, there are problems coming up as well. And Islamophobia is one of them. While we need to look out to these problems and see how we can progress in this society, and Muslim Manifesto has listed a 30-odd points here, how we want to proceed. My points are that we need to concentrate on education. One thing that we are lacking, wherever we are, yes, there are some of us who are making good progress in education and so forth, but by and large, our children are doing not as well as other communities. Regretfully, majority of the Muslim faith schools that I have seen are providing substandard education. They don't have resources, they don't have qualified teachers as many as they're required, they don't have laboratories, and therefore they are giving their own children substandard education. And the other thing is, of course, we need to be involved more in politics. And I agree with what other speakers have said in terms of don't vote for somebody who says, I'm a Muslim, vote for me, or don't vote for a political party. Let me tell you, I have said to my own party, certain individuals who may claim themselves to be Muslims as well, I have said to my own party, look, please, I hope you don't expect me to go and support this particular candidate, because I know that they will not sign up to this or any of or many of the points of this manifesto. And therefore, you need to be very careful who you are supporting as a community, and not necessarily a political party or a particular faith either. And I would say that whilst we have rights in this country, we have responsibilities. Rights and responsibilities go hand in hand. What we need to make sure is that we are doing our duties as well, as citizens of this country, as parents of this generation that we are bringing up, and as politicians and leaders, we are doing our duties properly. And I have to say to our Muslim leaders in the community that we may want to have a second look or how we are performing as Muslim leaders. Some of the issues that which are being talked about in the manifesto, they can be well addressed as under geographical areas. There are so many deprived areas, for example, in various parts of the country, in which it happens to be that majority of the people who are living there are Muslims. But non-Muslims living in that area are also just as deprived as Muslims in that area too. So the government, when it comes to prioritize those areas, they don't have to target a particular faith to improve the area or the education or health or employment in that area, but they need to address it as a geographical area, and I think that will be a way forward. Thank you very much for giving me this time.
In short, whatever has been brought here as values and as this manifesto, as a first step, I think it's a very wonderful contribution. They have done something which have not been done before by anyone. And a lot need to be done. This is telling us that there is a lot of space to do too many things. And you will see one thing I'm feeling now, and inshallah everyone will feel, that expectations from this manifesto are very, very high. But the wonderful work that has been done needs to be appreciated as a first step. Now, what we can do, the international politics are there. Islamophobia, I couldn't feel that to that extent as I'm feeling today. Muslim leadership has gone into the hands who have nothing to do with Islam. If I just point out one thing, the trainers of Osama bin Laden and the group of the 5 who were trained for Afghanistan, the trainers of ISIL and all these things, you will come into too many countries which are considering themselves as superpowers. But that does mean that everything they do wrong is put into the lap of Islam, which has nothing to do with Islam. And I categorically deny and disown these things and their teachings. Whatsoever they are doing, they have nothing to do with Islam or any school of thought of Islam. We need to address ourselves. We need to become the ambassadors of Islam and tell how beautiful Islam is. And Islam doesn't think of the Muslims only. It thinks of the whole humanity. It considers the whole globe as a living place for the whole human beings. Nobody asked me where you want to be born. It's by chance I was born to the parents who belong to Pakistan. It's by chance if somebody is born in a white family or African family or any family, it's by chance. It has nothing, not a point of elevation or anything else that a person is born in such and such family. Take off the skin, we are all the same. But the values that Islam has given us, the values which were brought in by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, needs to be brought in and told everyone we need to share it. Like the Muslim community have been sharing good things with the communities here. Similarly, these things need to be shared now. And very importantly, the time is running out because whatever is happening around the globe, the British government previously used to have its own ideas, own foreign policy, but in the past, the near past, what I'm seeing is, what I've been witnessing, that we are towing the policies of Americans. You know, we need to have that own policies. And the Muslim community, not only Muslim community, all other communities which live here and which consider it as a motherland, they need to play a very positive role which they can play. And hand in hand, I think this is the first step, but I think there is a big horizon where we can move forward. Thank you very much. I think brothers' eyes are showing me that my time is finished.
Thank you very much.
What I found in my experience as a journalist, as a person who was working within communities over many years in education, social welfare, all sorts of levels of community development, I found that Muslims were generally not thinking any further than maximum a year. There was no vision. There was no plan. And I have a deep respect for my Jewish brethren in this society because over the 100, 200 years that they've been here in a major way, one only has to look at the institutions of the Jewish fraternity and then compare them to our Muslim fraternity, and you can see the huge gap. Because the faith agenda of many of my Orthodox Jewish brethren are no different, by and large, from the Orthodox Muslims. So why is it, I ask myself, that the Jewish community has managed to adapt and integrate and create models and institutes of excellence, and Muslims, by and large,
we seem to be settling for mediocrity. Now, I'm going to be controversial here, but you know, if I walk into a Jewish community centre and an Islamic community centre, I can tell you personally that my impressions will be two very different things. And I think everybody here knows what I'm talking about, whoever's been in those. And I'm not going to excuse myself for comparing ourselves to the Jewish community, because they're the closest, absolutely the closest, both in terms of religion and both in terms of the practice, the orthopraxy, and in terms of the challenges they've had to face. So I think there's a huge lesson that Muslims can learn from the Jewish community, first of all. And I think there should be partnerships forged at all sorts of levels to not only learn best practice, but also perhaps to teach some things back, because I think there is a two-way process, because there are things that Muslims are good at. And I think this strapline, we thought about it, and we thought, what are we actually doing with this Muslim manifesto? It's not an exclusivist strategy. It's not meant to exclude anybody, yet we are Muslims. And we do want to define ourselves by that increasingly, and the media certainly wants to define us. And they seem to be having a whale of a time defining us in all sorts of ways which are Muslim, but in very, very not the kind of Muslim or the Islam that I know about. So I thought it's important we address the fact that we are being demonized in a way, especially with my own journalistic brethren, in a way which is unacceptable. But this word, our politics, the our is inclusive. It means, for me, ummah means the entire humanity. When you talk about ummah, the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he arrived in Medina, can anybody argue with me that when the Prophet came and he established arguably the first constitution the world had ever seen in Medina, his notion of ummah at that point was Sabians, Christians, Jews and Muslims. It wasn't exclusively Muslim. Whether we choose now to turn the word ummah into something exclusively Muslim is not my problem. It's certainly not the definition that I saw the Prophet use. So to me, our politics is about the politics of Britain, about humanity, the human beings that live in this country. Our politics, an ethical vision for all. This word ethics is not Essex. Every time I talk to people, I say, I'm really into ethics, ethical, whatever. I'm not necessarily ethical, but I really think that, that's where society should be going. And then they say to me, oh, Essex. Because the word is so underutilized in the English vocabulary. People have forgotten the word ethics. They've forgotten the word wisdom. When do you hear the word wisdom or ethics or these values spoken about on a regular basis? You don't. You don't hear it. And in fact, they hear more about Essex than ethics. But we're reminding everybody that ethics exists. And weirdly enough, a year ago when we started this narrative about ethics, what I found was we predicted because, there's a habit I've had over the last 10 years, working both with the US government, both working with the British government, working even with my Iranian brethren. I worked across the scope. So people find me very curious how I've managed to work with all camps and do something somewhere. And Ramadan Festival, Nogul is here. We did 3 years of Ramadan Festival and it was financed by the US Embassy. I tell people openly, because I came with an agenda to say I want cultural links to be created. If you can enable that, that's cool. If you can't, if you're doing it for some ulterior motive, then that's not my problem. But I'll go into projects for that reason. It's the same reason I went into this project, because I want to unite people. I want to bring people to a clear, common platform.
If we do not represent ourselves, then others will come and represent us. There are different types of lands. Some, if you do not place any seeds, it will not grow anything. There are lands that will start to grow weeds, and others have other problems. If the Muslim community does not have any representation, then there will be people who do not have any sympathy, may call themselves Muslims, will represent Muslims, but will not represent the community. Unfortunately, the Muslim leadership in Britain has failed. Mohsen and my generation is second generation. My father's generation came with the intention, as Lord Qurban had already said, that they will return back to their countries. They are here for a better career, better education for their children. But after 40, 50 years, they realize that they will not be going back to their countries. It is about time that we engage in this community and realize that this is our home and we need to plan for the future of our children. I remember as a child, in the 80s, people decided that we need to have cemeteries in this country, and they said, let's buy 100 graves. They're more than enough, because the rest of us will be going back. Within the next year or so, they realized 100 graves mean nothing because the people are not going back. It is about time that we realize that we need to engage. We've had many politicians talk about Muslim community not engaging. Now that we realize ourselves that we need to represent our own community. So far we've been service providers, but we need to become decision makers. If we do not engage in politics, we will remain what we were 50, 60 years ago. My father came to this country almost 50 years ago. And I know many people who came almost 60 years ago and probably even more. But we must realize that we are here to remain, and we need to engage, not only just politically, socially, but in all sorts of manners, in the education of our children. And that engagement would start from engaging in the British politics. I congratulate Brother Mohsin and the entire team that has been involved in it for the past many months, ever since I've been on board. And I'm sure that they've been working on it for some time. It is about time that our community realizes and our politicians realize that they need to represent the Muslim community. And the Muslim community has long suffered in this country for not being represented or being underrepresented. I do realize that we are short of time. There could be many other points that I could raise, but I would only end with one last sentence. When you do not speak for yourselves, then others will speak for you. You may dislike it or you may like it, but that will be your philosophy, your theology, and your mind if you do not speak for yourself. Thank you for listening.
Muslim individual Muslims, families, communities do not want to participate, do not want to vote. They might not vote for me, they may not vote for my party, but I think they do. And I think, again, it behoves on us to make that more possible. And you elected an organisation I've worked with, and I think they're very good, and they're working again in this election. And the third thing, I do disagree, I'm afraid, with the man for Press TV, fundamentally, and I think you actually mentioned Labour politicians, I'd love to know which ones they are. And there may be politicians who have said that you should be concerned about domestic and not foreign policy issues. Well, I have to declare an interest. This is where David and I work a lot together. I'm the secretary of the Britain-Palestine All-Party Group and the former vice chair now of Labour Friends of Palestine in the Middle East. And the way I would put it is this: there is certainly no discouragement for Muslim communities to talk as much about foreign policy as they do about domestic policy. But equally, again, let's not divide ourselves, because there are many people who are not from Muslim communities. The hundreds of thousands of people who were marching last summer about Gaza came from all communities. Of course there was a big Muslim representation. There are many, many other people who care about that, and that's absolutely true in my constituency. And the overwhelming majority of people in this country, irrespective of whether they have any religion or no religion, whatever their origin is, support the people in Gaza and support self-determination, and of course my party will recognise a Palestinian state. So let's not skew the message, and let's not make ourselves victims in that way. Let's build those bridges so that when we're talking about, I absolutely agree, the links between domestic and foreign policy are there. Everybody has the right to talk as much about foreign policy as they do about domestic policy, but that's what I would like to see going forward. I just signed up to speak in another Gaza debate. I'm sure David will be as well on Wednesday this week. It is an issue that's very much, it's the number one foreign policy issue. It's an issue that we talk about all the time here, and I welcome the support from Muslim communities here. But let's make sure that we work together in that way, and irrespective of party and irrespective of who we are. Thank you.
As a Muslim health professional working in the public health sector, I mean, I've just looked at some of the figures that Mohsin's just shown in respect of health, and obviously this is my, my scope. 24.1% of Muslims above the age of 50 are in or have bad or very bad health, and that obviously that affects quite a significant figure of Muslims. I think, I mean, I'm looking through the manifesto and we seem to have missed out, I think, greatly at number 15, where significantly improve health and well-being in Muslim communities. I believe that more elderly people's nursing homes for Muslims is an issue that we should be covering as well, with carers who can provide the care expected to fulfill the spiritual needs and care which is essential to Muslim belief. That's, I think, something that's been overlooked for several years and has been covered by many other different communities and different people from all faiths. The other thing I would look at as a Muslim health professional is that over a period of time, perhaps decades of health inequality outlined by Donald Aitchison in the Black Report, and we have been reminded that have been sufficient research which suggests that some groups of people were not accessing health service or simply their health needs weren't being met in comparison in groups of people from affluent backgrounds. Well, obviously now we're looking at Muslim care which has been deprived to them, and overlooking at the social gradient over a period of time. We've been reminded several times to look at the Marmot's report that came out around 2010 and the Public Health Report of 2013. Just want to remind ourselves that we are costing, health does cost NHS quite a bit of billions of pounds. So health inequalities are largely preventable. Not only in there is a strong social justice case for addressing health inequalities, but there is also a pressing economic case. The things that I've been looking forward to discussing really, and I really have to cut myself short because it's a manifesto and we've run out of time, is that there is simply not enough that's going on in terms of providing healthcare needs for a lot of the British minority ethnics, and we sort of fall quite short. One of the prime examples that I want to share here is that of Redbridge, which has a very diverse population with practicing various beliefs and faiths, is that in the health profile listed for 2012, it suggested that a local value of all ethnic groups that had used emergency services in 2010 and 2012 was at an alarming rate of 43.7%, which was higher than England's rate of value. But I feel that there is a change that we can bring about as Muslims, and I did want to raise it here as a platform, is that how can we achieve that and reduce significantly the rate of health inequality? Well, one of the ideas that I felt was important was that we should run a service by the public health sector and leading health professionals, approved by the care commissioning groups, I guess, which is essential as well, is to use in community care centres, places of worship, and allowing scholars to actually allow us to demonstrate how we can reduce those figures that we've been talking about by educating and promoting health services, especially when we have people that call 111 or 999 whether one should visit the walk-in clinics or perhaps empowering families to address minor ailments. And I think that is something that we've overlooked for a significant time. And perhaps one of our objectives here is to save NHS a large amount of money. I'm not sure how that's going to happen when most of the call is usually for privatising the NHS firms. But it would give people more informed choices and direct them to accessing services that hasn't happened. And I think we all play a key role in terms of all of our professions to actually directing them to accessing those services, which will enhance them to using those services, but at the same time looking at the disadvantaged communities and giving them access to public health services. One of the other barriers is always going to be services that are reduced for those whose language isn't English. And I think today, if we play a key role in establishing some of our centres and using them for the right purpose, those figures that I just discussed with elderly people being over 50, and so as Mohsin highlighted quite clearly, is that we can reduce those figures and we can reduce that social gradient that we've been alarmed at for several decades. And with that really is the hope and vision that I have, is that we can demonstrate it through our own support, through our own communities.
Thank you.
I work on several youth empowerment and women empowerment projects. I'm involved in the government level as well. I'm a public speaker. I go and talk about these issues in the universities. Recently, I've started feeling an almost like critical thinking that I've actually lived in a free world till now. The youth I'm engaging in have got this mindset, they just have no hope for the future living in this country. And there, we're talking about Muslims here. The couple of engagement that I had in Imperial College where I come from, and I'm a first female Pakistani aeronautical engineer, I'm a women empowered myself. I was engaged with those students and I felt that they had no hope. They were just talking about, the poems that they were reciting were all about hijabs, or they were talking about disengagement from the society. And I felt, what's happening to our youth in this country? When Mohsin came and he said that we are thinking about this, I said, I want to be part of this. Because I felt I'm a very balanced Muslim. I'm a highly, in terms of education, I'm also a qualified teacher. I felt I can bring a lot more to the manifesto in terms of balance. In terms of, because I'm in public relation, I will engage the current political system. I will engage them in the talks. And I want the women and youth of this country, whichever background they're coming from, ethnic minority, definitely Muslims, because we are talking about Muslim manifesto here, to be part of this political system. This is a platform where they can be engaged. We'll be running a lot of forums for the youth and for women separately, where they come and they have a say. There are a lot of women issues as well in terms of Muslims and in terms of policies in this country that doesn't support Muslim women. I'm not just talking about hijab, I'm talking about marriages, I'm talking about divorces, the system that you have to go through. And I feel this is a very, very strong forum that we can all come together, united, and work with the government in this country and tell them how we can work together as a positive role models going forward and engaging ourselves with this community, with the government, to bring as a positivity to the society. Thank you so much.
Well, that's it. I just want to thank Lord Ahmad and all the other distinguished members of Parliament and prospective members of Parliament who are here, and the members of the House of Lords. And all of you, because without an audience, without the participants, I think the speakers could be just talking to the wall. Thank you very much, all of you, for turning up and giving your valuable time.